Hi, I'm Gary Younge.
And I'm Carys of Oxford.
Every week, Carys and I will be talking about those stories in the news that are overreported and the ones that are going completely under the radar and not talked about enough.
This is Over the Top, Under the Radar.
Carys, you're back.
Gary, I'm
how
back.
How you been?
I'm good. I'm tanned. I'm several shades darker. And yeah, I had a holiday. What did I miss?
Well, you missed, I've been seeing other women, Carys.
Who?
Pfizer, Aisha, actually your mates.
Okay, I mean, if you're going to cheat on me with my friends, that's fine. I'm okay with that.
Okay, that's interesting.
In a podcast context.
In a podcast context, not. I've just been doing quite a lot of university modules that we all have to do about workplace banter, among other things.
So, like training. You've been doing training?
Yeah, and I've got to say, I went into it kind of deeply cynical, but actually, I learned quite a lot.
Come on, give us some. Let's educate me, educate the listeners. What have we learned?
I guess I'm just talking about my gaps in my real understanding about issues surrounding disability, some of the details around the Equality Act of 2010. I mean, some of it is crazy corporate stuff, like, one of your colleagues comes and says that they've been harassed by their boss. Do you A, punch them in the face, B, report this to the person who is necessary, or C, and it's like, well,
punch them in the face, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. Pop. Anyway, you've been on holiday, you've come back dry roasted. How does it feel to be back?
I'm not going to lie, it doesn't feel great because I was somewhere fairly tropical and it is pretty rainy and cold here. It just feels like everything's getting a bit fashy. Like you go away for a couple of weeks and like the fascism count's gone up a bit. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not feeling great about it, but I am feeling good about seeing people that I've missed, humans. That's a good reason to be in the UK. But just
bit fashy.
Just feels like a bit fashy. I tried to avoid the news and then I've come back and I was like to my mum, what's been happening? And the rundown was not good, Gary. Didn't feel like much good had happened. And really importantly, couldn't find anyone to go to see Beyonce with me. So I didn't get Beyonce tickets when they were out.
You didn't want to buy 2 tickets and then work it out?
Tickets are too expensive. Like last time I just bought 3, safe in the knowledge that I would fill the seats. But for whatever reason, despite its Grammy award-winning status, my friends aren't that into Cowboy Carter. And I didn't hear from you, so I didn't know if you'd want to come.
Was I asked?
No. I mean, you don't strike me as someone that wants to spend £100 to see Beyonce, but maybe that's my lack of ambition.
See, that, Carys, is unconscious bias. I learned about that.
Oh, he's been trained.
Yeah,
he's been trained.
See?
Okay, so if I can get hold of some tickets, do you want to come?
Probably not.
Yeah. So we've had a message from a supporter, which has made me... You sang Chaz and Dave.
I did.
Hannah on Blue Sky says, another excellent podcast this week, worth the monthly Patreon, just for Gary singing Chaz and Dave alone. Keep up the good work. Wow.
Yeah. Last Friday, I went to Margate to the Turner Contemporary because there is a photo exhibition of 100 Years of Resistance by Steve McQueen, and I've written a foreword to the book that's accompanying the exhibition. Steve McQueen, who... I don't think I'm breaching any confidences here when I say he is a fan of the podcast. He likes, and he was actually evangelizing for the podcast at the exhibition. He said to a couple of people, "You've got to listen to this podcast."
Oh, thanks, Steve.
Yeah. So the Turner Contemporary is in Margate, and I struggle to talk about going to Margate without just getting my Chaz and Dave on. I'm not going to do it again, though.
Didn't see that coming.
You can find us all over socials, be it Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, or X, used to be Twitter, at @over_under_pod_. Big shout out to the people who joined us on Patreon recently. Grace, Natasha, Shabna, Kate, Grace R, Jill, Maurice or Morris, Russell, George, and Mark. Thank you very much. We appreciate your support.
We now have 436 Patreon supporters. 406 of our Patreon supporters are donating regularly to keep the podcast going. Thank you so much for your generosity. There's lots of podcasts out there, and most of the news and current affairs ones have got big media brands behind them. The BBC, Murdoch, Gary Lineker, who has a big podcast company. But Over Under is small but mighty. We've recently been in the Radio Times and the Sunday Times, partly due to our growing community and all of your support. So thank you so much.
Yeah, if you are sick of the way that the mainstream media frames things, then we are not the only alternative, but we are one small contribution to a different, more diverse, I would hope less embedded way of looking at the world and engaging. So if you're enjoying the pod and you find value in what we do now, it would be great if you could consider upgrading your membership if you can afford to chip in a little bit more. Your support makes a huge difference. Thanks for being part of this.
If you can afford to support us financially, packages start at just £5 a month plus VAT. That is 2 expensive coffees, depending on where you live, a month. That money helps us to keep the show running. It gives you access to bonus episodes, our weekly newsletter, the exclusive and very fun Over Under WhatsApp community. And if you want to support us on Patreon, just search Over the Top, Under the Radar on the Patreon website. And as Gary would say, put your money where your ears are. This week, I want to talk to you about William Hague, free speech, and Tim Westwood. What's on your agenda?
I want to talk about the price of eggs in America and defense spending in Britain. So let's go.
So my over the top, I don't know if it's William Hague as a human or his recent speech. So William Hague, former leader of the Conservative Party, used to drink a lot of pints or something.
I think he drank his aging pints at one stage, or at least he claimed to.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So something about pints, former Tory leader, and he is now the Chancellor of Oxford University. Don't ask me what that entails, but he gets the job for 10 years. He gave his sort of inaugural speech with all the pomp and ceremony and the cap and gown and all the gold and the brocade. And of all the things he chose to talk about, one of the main ones was free speech and cancel culture. He did say that he supports free speech within the law, so he wasn't advocating for hate speech, I imagine. But there are a couple of things about this that I think are really annoying and false. So basically, they stem from William Hague not really understanding what cancellation or no platforming, which he also talked about, are. And I'd be interested in your views on this, but no platform in particular was a policy and a form of student boycott that was pioneered by the NUS, so the National Union of Students in the UK, in the 70s. I think it was 1974, the NUS established a no platform policy. And it basically said, we're not going to allow racists or fascists to speak at our events. The thing that I think William Hague and a lot of other so-called free speech advocates don't understand is that no platform is about people controlling their own spaces. It literally refers to the idea of a platform or a stage and who you're going to let speak on it. It isn't a violation of someone's free speech rights for someone to say, I don't want to platform you. I don't have to invite Nigel Farage to my birthday party. And when people like William Hague throw in no platform alongside free speech, I really do think it is a fundamental misunderstanding of what the policy is. The first thing that I want to talk about is the idea of no platforming. I have questions about it. I wonder sometimes, a policy that worked in the 1970s, if it can work in the social media age, if it is the most effective tactic against fascists. But I think we have to be pretty bullish in asserting people's right to say, when it's our platform, we get to decide who's on the stage. Second thing we have to talk about, cancellation, cancel culture, is another thing that has been willfully misunderstood by the right and so-called free speech advocates. Similarly to woke, it's a bit of, I think, probably originally African-American vernacular. When you say someone's cancelled, you mean that you don't support them anymore. So one might say, Beyonce's cancelled, never cancel her. That means I'm not going to buy her music. I'm not going to buy tickets to her gig. It is fully within our rights to use our economic power to not support people that we don't agree with. And I think that this sort of conflation of people being allowed to choose how they organise, who they listen to, who they invite, is not the same as free speech. And I think at this time when so many so-called free speech advocates have so much power, it's quite important for us to draw those lines. So I'm over William Hague using his big set piece speech where he could have talked about anything in the world, so many social problems. Universities are such an important part of like British and global cultural life, all of the funding into research, all of the amazing things. And he wants to wang on about student unions, cancel culture, and no platforming. So I'm over William Hague. I think it was a crap speech. And I think, given he's representing quite an elite university, he maybe needs to look into some of the concepts he's talking about before he gives a speech about them, because I think he's misunderstood.
So first of all, I want to share an experience that I've had that speaks directly to this, which would have been about 6 or 7 years ago. Myself and a colleague, Nesreen Malik, a colleague from The Guardian, were nominated for this award. Also nominated for this award was a journalist who regularly writes articles that are widely understood to be very racist. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to put her name out there because I don't want to invite a pile-on, and this thing isn't about her. So we're nominated for this award. So it's a diversity and inclusion award. Now, had it been politics or foreign reporting or something, I would have thought it was unfortunate, but okay, things happen. But this was about diversity, and this is someone who was actively writing against diversity. And so we said, you know what? We would like to take our names off this. We don't want to be nominated for this award. We were then accused of no platforming her and of cancelling her, when in fact what we had done was cede the platform. We didn't ask her to withdraw. And we wrote to the people and we said, look, this isn't for us. We're pulling out. They then said, well, you can't pull out. And then they started quoting Orwell and Enlightenment and a whole load of other horseshit. Like we didn't understand what the
Voltaire and Orwell. That's the quotes you get. Yeah. Voltaire and Orwell.
So we said, okay, well, now we have to do it publicly. So we did it publicly, a single tweet each. And then we retweeted each other's tweets. And we resolved not to respond to any comments or talk about it at all. We were accused of no platforming her. We were accused of cancelling her, when in fact, we hadn't done any of that. We had ceded the platform. The people who ran the awards galvanized people, because I know some people who they asked to do this and they said, no, actually, he's got a point, to write articles. There were these articles claiming that we didn't know what free speech was and all of that. And our right to association, our right for our speech, our right to withdraw was completely ignored. Another fun fact, because they didn't let us withdraw from the awards, it turned out that I won. And those fuckers still haven't given me the award. So there's that too. So
give him his award.
Give me my award that I didn't want, that you made me stay in for. So there's that about it. My experience of it has been exactly what you say. People don't understand, and they don't, when they bring it up in a certain way. But there's also, where are these free speech people when the IHRA was being introduced? Where are these free speech people on Palestine? Where are they about the BBC documentary that's just been taken offline? I don't believe in free speech, not unfettered free speech. I think that hate speech should be criminalized. I think that anti-Semitic speech should be criminalized, along with other racially problematic speeches. But where are these people when students are being beaten up on campuses because they're saying that they're indulging in hate speech? They're nowhere. So what you end up with is some people you can talk smack about and some people you can't.
And there's some freedom, the freedom to be like, to use your parlance, a git, the freedom to be offensive or hateful or to deny people's rights is one thing, but we don't have free association. I think it's a deliberate misunderstanding, and it's a pernicious one, because it's a way of taking away our power to protest against people we don't like, which we've also seen with the BDS movement, the boycott, divest, sanctions movement. Like, we do not have to listen to or buy things from people that we don't agree with. That is the bare minimum of rights that we should have under a capitalist society. And I think it's actually quite important that we defend our powers of free association. I do think we have to evolve in how we deal with fascists and we deal with hate speech and we deal with this army of gits. But we also need to be pretty clear that we all have a right to not engage with people we don't want to engage with, especially when it's like paying to listen to them or to see them or to consume, cancelling someone is like, I'm not going to give you my money. It's a personal act. It's none of your business.
You know what, though? One of my takeaways from this conversation is that I really want Nigel Farage to come to your birthday party next year. I think that would be awesome.
He's not invited.
Well,
and if he turned up, that's what I mean, Gary. If he turned up being like, you can't not invite me, it's my free speech, I'd be like, fuck off.
I know, but I want you to invite him.
I mean, it would be a memorable birthday. It would be a memorable birthday. Nigel, if you're listening, that wasn't an invite. Don't come to my birthday.
Okay, and Nigel, if you're listening, get in touch because, maybe I can get you in through the back door. My over the top, myself and Aisha did discuss this, or we touched on this last week, but it's not going away, is defense spending. And we touched on it because Aisha was talking about J.D. Vance's mental speech in Munich, and we were talking about Trump's game plan. And that one of his one of the things that he keeps saying is, we are tired of subsidizing European defense. You people have got to spend more. Now, of course, dutifully, Starmer is saying, well, we're going to increase defense spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2027, which is 3 years earlier than planned, and that he has an ambition to raise it to 3% during the next parliament. This is because Starmer's going to Washington for what could well be a difficult conversation, and I'd be intrigued as to what an easy conversation with Trump would be like around the Ukraine. And Starmer's also said, look, this money's got to come from somewhere, so we're going to take it from aid. We're going to cut the aid budget by almost half, from 0.5% of GDP to 0.3% of GDP. And there's a few things here. First of all, Trump is actually right to say that Europe's defense is being subsidized by America. I don't think he's wrong about that. And the question I have then is, maybe we want to spend more on peace and less on war. Maybe we could have a smaller bill if we stop running around the world murdering people and supporting the murder of people who are inconvenient. And that doesn't mean that there aren't, bad faith actors, aggressive people. It's not like Ukraine wasn't invaded. It's not like you could talk your way out of that. But part of that scenario was the possibility of NATO expanding and so on. It may have been wrong. It was wrong. I'm not saying it wasn't wrong for Russia to invade. It was wrong, but there was a rationale, and that rationale was about the expansion of NATO. One of the ways in which we spend less on defense is by spending less on war. And we, for some reason, have decided, not for some reason, partly because of post-imperial delusion, and a range of other stuff. Our defense budget is high in no small part because we run around looking for fights and trying to force the world to our will. Our here, I'm talking about Britain. And then the final thing is, whatever happened to tough choices? That, when it's pensioners and heat, the two-child policy, it's like, look, we've got to make tough choices here. Rachel Reeves always telling us, well, we've got no money. We've got no money for that. We've got no money. But we get money for this. And they're going to take it away. This tough choice, all of their tough choices, and I think I've said this on a podcast before, they're always tough for the people who are having it toughest. And I got to say also, in terms of what Starmer would count as his other priorities, and there is a link here between military, aid, and immigration. Lots of people who migrate don't migrate because they want to. They migrate because they have to. Why do they have to? Because we bombed them, or because we sold arms to people who bombed them, or because we supported other people who bombed them. And so they have to leave. And the other reason they have to leave quite often is because we were part of a system, colonial system, that impoverished them. And we are part of a rules-based international economic order that impoverishes them. If you rack up the military spending and you dial down the aid spending, you know what you're going to get? More migrants, which you say you don't want.
It's a good over. I think is so weird is that, like, Keir Starmer's whole thing is that he's the sort of successor to Blair, and he's basically dismantled one of the main planks of New Labour's policy, which was, I believe, the creation of what was then DFID, the Department for International Development, and a commitment that the UK would always spend like a certain percentage of its budget on humanitarian aid. I don't know if it's like a macho thing. Like, does Keir feel like he needs to be more manly and that like paying for guns will help? I'm not convinced that's going to work. I don't know how I feel about UK aid spending. I know that some of it has had a positive impact, but I think it would probably be better if we just paid most countries reparations, because for the most part we just like owe them money and it's not an act of charity. So it's not like I'm uncritical about aid spending, but I think that like you're right, there's a deliberate misunderstanding of the fact that aid spending and non-defense spending is about soft power. It's about diplomatic relationships with countries. Like, it's about a society which obviously Trump doesn't believe in, like an international society where we're somewhat in solidarity with one another. And I mean, it is intriguing when the Trump comes along and is like, well, why would we help you? The sort of liberal global consensus doesn't have much of a response. But yeah, I think it's short-sighted. I think the other thing to mention is the UK has a huge arms industry. There's a huge industry of people lobbying for us to like manufacture and sell and produce more arms. And like, we're talking billions, tens of billions of pounds every year. So there's also a huge lobbying arm of companies that like make money from war and make money from us buying kit for war. There are groups like Campaign Against the Arms Trade who do really sterling work every time we have those big arms fairs, like a wedding fair, and they're probably in the same conference center, but just like people being like, check out these bazookas. So I think it's also like we've got to be pretty hard-headed that like people make money from these decisions and those people hire lobbyists and those lobbyists lobby government. So yeah, like it's disappointing and it's not surprising. And I think the thing missing from the media coverage, because I also heard on the weekend an absolutely charming interview. Someone was like, defense spending's gone down, but welfare spending's gone up. And it was like, that's a good thing. We're spending more money supporting people and less money killing people. He's like, we need to cut that welfare spending and get more guns. And it's just, yeah, I feel like we're in a parallel universe. These are the things that made me not excited to come back from holiday, Gary.
I mean, at a certain point, you have to wonder, well, what are you defending, actually? You're defending a country where the pensioners are cold, the kids are hungry, the schools are ill-equipped. I share your skepticism about aid, but it's not like they're going to cut that aid and give it to reparations. And, you know, if we look at what's going on in America, and like, I'm even more skeptical about US aid than I am about British aid. What I would like is a better relationship with the rest of the world, as opposed to them just, given that they're not going to be reparations anytime soon, then I want them to step up that budget and make it better. The conversation they're having isn't about aid or reparations. It's about aid or murder.
Aid or murder, and murder wins.
Yeah, every time.
My under is Tim Westwood. So for those listeners who don't know who he is, Tim Westwood was for many years a Radio 1 and Radio 1 Extra DJ, had a big sort of hip hop show, and was, yeah, I guess a pretty high profile DJ who also did a lot of like touring universities and playing gigs there. There was a BBC Guardian investigation into allegations of sexual harassment and predatory behaviour and sexual misconduct. And after the BBC initially sort of sticking their hands up and being like, we don't know what you're talking about, this week they have admitted that they fell short and failed people over Tim Westwood. So another example of a high profile man with power and profile that a big institution either turned a blind eye, or maybe in some cases, we don't know, enabled sexual misconduct and predatory behaviour. Now, it's important to recognise that some of the allegations against Tim Westwood are still being investigated by the Metropolitan Police. His solicitors have said that he denies all allegations of criminal and other misconduct and say that he has never acted in a predatory or sexual manner. The external inquiry into Tim Westwood that cost £3.3 million for something that was an open secret, not even that closed a secret in sort of the music industry and hip hop circles. The report came out. There were some missed opportunities. Casey, who was investigated, said there were a lot of factors that meant the BBC should have been alert to the threat that he posed to women and girls. The reason that I think this is going under the radar, or one of the reasons, is that, as far as we know, most of the young women that have brought allegations against Tim Westwood are Black. And we don't have a huge amount of research into Black women's experience of sexual harassment in the workplace, but we do have some evidence from the US, and the TUC published a report last year to suggest that it's pretty prevalent. So the TUC found that 65% of the Black women that they surveyed had experienced sexual harassment in some form. So that's unwelcome verbal sexual advances, unwanted touching, or crude jokes. 51% of those respondents said the experience impacted their mental health. 36% said it impacted their confidence at work. And the thing that really stood out to me, and that like this story, I don't know if it will help with, is that the TUC found that 58% of Black women who had experienced some form of sexual harassment didn't report it, because 38% of them just thought it wouldn't be taken seriously. And so I don't particularly want to talk about Tim Westwood. I didn't like him before these allegations came out. He's cringy and weird. I think it is important that we talk about who gets to be a victim, and like who are the victims that the media wants to talk about. And these young Black women, like some of them are under the age of consent young, deserve to have their stories heard, and they have been let down by the BBC. And I think, yeah, I wanted to talk about it.
Is the element that's under the radar for you the racial element?
I think generally the Tim Westwood story hasn't got a ton of coverage. It has been covered by The Guardian, but The Guardian broke the investigation. So, you know, they've got journalists there who are invested in telling that story. But I haven't seen the volume of coverage about it that we've seen in some other cases. So I don't know, Mohammed Al-Fayed. It's been, I would say, pretty underreported.
Do you think that is because the survivors are Black?
I think it's a factor, yeah. I think that it's because it's Black women. I think if it were young, blonde, white girls, then probably it will get more coverage. And I can't prove that, but I think it is one of the factors. And to be clear, it's not just Black women, but I think there's a type of victim that we're comfortable with and a type of victim that we're not. And Black women are overly sexualized, stereotyped as strong. This TUC research suggests very reluctant to come forward when they do experience harassment. And so I think it is important for the women who were brave enough to talk about Tim Westwood that we talk about their stories.
I don't know that I have much to add. I agree with you. And I think it's an interesting thing to think on as to the degree to which we think that race is a factor. And if we expand it to P. Diddy and others, where a lot of the people involved there were Black, the degree to which the reporting is weak because the survivors are Black, and the degree to which the detection is weaker because the survivors are Black.
The other thing I want to say is that I also think there's a wave of coverage you get when there's a negative story about the BBC. So there will be a wave of coverage from right-wing media outlets because the BBC has admitted fault. But that isn't the same as covering Tim Westwood and his harassment. I mean, if we really want to go after a media brand, when these allegations surfaced, Tim Westwood had made his way over to Capital FM. Global is the company that owns that. So he was on commercial radio. And the silence of that employer was pretty deafening. So yeah, I'm not interested in this as a stick to beat the BBC with, but I do think we need to tell Black women's stories. Sexual harassment is so common for so many women and people at work, and we need to use the high profile examples as a way of drawing people's attention to what happens at work and things that just aren't okay.
For my under, I want to talk about the price of eggs. Yeah, so you didn't see that coming. The price of eggs.
I didn't see it coming.
The price of eggs in America.
Is this going to be like a sort of Alf Garnett? Oh, okay, in America.
Yeah, what Alf Garnett talks about eggs?
Just a kind of everything's getting expensive.
Yeah, cool, blimey, love a duck. No, eggs are getting expensive. They're getting very expensive, and weirdly, the price of eggs was a theme in the election. Trump used it to, even though inflation was coming down or had been coming down, the price of eggs had gone up. So when Biden took over in 2021, it was $1.60 for a dozen eggs. That's a bit more than a quid. When he left, it was $3.65 for a dozen eggs. Now it's $4.95. And according to the USDA, the US Department of Agriculture, prices are going to rise another 20% in 2025. Whatever else he achieved, he has not brought the price of eggs down. Now, who knows in the future? But if he does, it will be because of avian flu. It won't have anything to do with economic policies in the same way it didn't have anything to do with Biden's economic policies. And one of the reasons why he might not achieve it is because he fired the bloody people who could help with the avian flu and therefore keep the prices down. I think this thing about, well, and I saw some quite reputable journalists saying, look, everybody's getting bent out of shape about Trump winning. If people want to vote on the price of eggs, then it's up to them. Let's just not pretend that it was only about eggs. It's not that the economy wasn't an issue. It was a big issue. And that's why a lot of Democrats stayed at home. But the idea that you are not seeing any of the racism, any of the bigotry, any of the xenophobia, and it's just like, thing is, eggs are too high. Well, that's on you. And there was a statement from someone, A.R. Moxon. He said, historians have a word for Germans who joined the Nazi party, not because they hated Jews, but out of a hope of restored patriotism or a sense of economic anxiety or hope to preserve their religious values. And that word is Nazi. Nobody cares about their motives anymore. They joined what they joined. They lent their support and their moral approval. And in so doing, they bound themselves to everything that came after. Who cares anymore what particular knot they used in the binding? That is the quote. And I feel that about Trump. You might have voted for Trump because of the price of eggs or because you're a businessman or he's a businessman or whatever. But now you got to own it. You've got to own all of it. And that includes the fact that with Elon Musk and his DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency nonsense, they fired a bunch of workers who were deeply involved in the government's response to avian flu. And they're struggling now to get them back. They don't know, because when they fire these people, they shut off their emails, they kick them out. So the people, not all of the people, but a significant number of the people who were working on this got fired over the last few weeks, and they don't know how to get them back, which that's not the only group of people who've been fired. The nuclear safety people were fired. Not all of them, but enough of them to be worrying. It speaks to me there's a lot of fear, and there's a, really legitimate fear about what Trump might do and what he has done already. It's not that fear need be tempered, but it needs to be contextualized within the notion of his incompetence and his people's incompetence. And this thing about this notion of efficiency that they have, which these are incompetent people. These are incompetent people. They are not hyper efficient. They're good at firing people. And that was his bloody catchphrase. So they're really good at that. That doesn't make you efficient. An axeman who chops down a tree, he's not being efficient. He's just hacking away at a piece of wood. And these people, they don't have the solutions. And sooner or later, it's going to be apparent to people that the price of their eggs has not gone down, but their neighbor has been fired. That, they've got rid of the thing about pronouns at the bottom of the emails. They can kind of get rid of DEI stuff. They get rid of Black History Month. They can do all of that. But the fact that other people are more miserable doesn't make you happier. Or maybe it does, and that's your problem, but it certainly doesn't make you better off, and it definitely doesn't affect the price of eggs. These people are useless. They are useless, and they are incompetent, and they are dangerous. And this is one example to me. A small example is eggs, although they are now in a situation where they have to import eggs from Turkey, not the bird, the country. They're going to import 420 million eggs from Turkey because they're running shy. So that's my under.
I didn't know where you were going with eggs. I'm not going to lie to you. I thought it was weird. But you landed the plane. It's a good one. It's a good under. I think, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because the people that Trump is for don't buy eggs for $4. The people that are going to benefit from his presidency were the ones sat behind him on the day at his inauguration, like it's billionaires. It's an indicator of something that everyone should have been wise to. Like, he doesn't care about you, and he doesn't care about what your food shop is. He's happy to weaponize your racism or your economic anxiety and insecurity to get power. But once he has power, he's only acting in the interests of a very few people. The Elon Musk, I'm being so efficient, I'm saving so much money by firing everyone. It's just like, he literally just did this at Twitter. He took over Twitter, a bunch of people quit, A ton more people resigned. The platform is now crap. Firing people is a great way to save money if you don't need to get anything done. But like, if you actually need to like run a country, then just blanket laying everyone like, yeah, you've saved money, but like saving money isn't the only thing that government needs to do. It's not really coherent unless you understand that like Trump is for himself and billionaires. Like, he doesn't buy his eggs from the same place that you buy your eggs.
Yeah, he doesn't buy his eggs. He gets somebody else to buy his eggs. He doesn't know how much eggs cost. He doesn't fucking care. And anyway, they may now be infected because the people who were employed to keep America safe in a range of ways have all been fired because they couldn't, not all of them, but enough of them, because Elon Musk decided that they, what they were doing wasn't of value.
It's like you doing the weekly food shop. I'd say this because I know that Gary does do the weekly shop for his family. You come in, he's got a wheelie trolley and everything. You can see him around the streets of Hackney.
I rock my trolley, man.
He rocks his trolley. Him and the Jamaican grannies, they got them. He rocks his trolley. He turns up and he's like, guess what, guys? Half the food shop. By buying half the food. It's just like, well, what are we going to eat? Yeah, it's quite crazy making. But I think it is also important because we can't see this ground that these are like horrible racist bastards, but the trains are running on time and the food prices are low. It's like, no, they're horrible racist bastards and the trains won't be running and the food will be expensive. So like, there really is no win here unless you're a billionaire or own a ton of crypto. These are the people who will benefit. Thank you for listening to Over the Top, Under the Radar. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts.
If you want to support the show, find us by searching Over the Top, Under the Radar on Patreon.
You can sign up to our newsletter at overunderpod.com.
And connect with us on socials at over_under_pod_.
See you next week.